Hi, I'm James Gailliard, and welcome to In Black and White, where we offer clear, challenging, and compelling conversations and commentaries on the issues that matter most. Whether it's public policy, personal development, a master's class, a critical conversation, a Bible study, or a subject in the news cycle, I hope today's episode informs you, and I hope it inspires you. Well, welcome to today's show. I'm James Gailliard. I am your host of In Black and White. Today, I want to jump right into it. I really want to combine two subjects together today. I want to talk about the issue of arming teachers, arming not as in limbs, but arming teachers as in allowing them to carry weapons in schools. But I want to couple that conversation with the issue that just surfaced here in North Carolina, Madison County, North Carolina. A school district has just announced that it plans to put AR-15 guns in every school in the event that there's a mass shooting in their school. You heard me right. Coming to perhaps a school district or county commissioner meeting near you is the possibility of making a recommendation that schools now have safes, and in those safes are AR-15 assault weapons. I want to know what you think about that. And today I want to talk about the pros and cons of this and want to kind of weigh in on some of this stuff, while we're also talking about the issue of arming teachers in general. And you may think, well, this has nothing to do with where I live, but I think it has everything to do with where we all live, because as we zoom out and we kind of look at this, we're going to start to see that this is an issue that's going on in a whole lot of states and literally around our country. It's particularly a result of the homicides, the shooting victims in Uvalde, Texas. I still pray for those families, those 19 students, those 2 teachers. I hope you do as well. And so why is Madison County, North Carolina doing this? Well, they're putting AR-15 rifles in special safes in their school. This was reported by the Asheville Citizen-Times. The sheriff, interestingly enough, is a Democrat. Sheriff Buddy Harwood. He says that having the rifles is going to allow schools and the police officers to quickly defend themselves against school shootings. Let me give you a little background on Madison County, North Carolina. Madison County, North Carolina is a population of about 21,000 people. It is a county that's about 95% white, less than 2% black. This was a county that Trump beat Biden in with 61% of the vote. It is a county that Dan Forrest beat our current governor, Roy Cooper, in with 56% of the vote. So it's a Republican county. I think the Democratic sheriff has a Republican opponent in the general election, and it could be that he's trying to make nicey-nicey with people on the Republican side. And so some of my concern about this is this might be a political move, and I don't ever think we should be politicizing public education, because I think we need to put students and we need to put teachers first, and we need to find ways to really properly educate our children. And so what are some of the pros and cons about this? Let's talk about it for just a moment. And let me just say, this is not an isolated case. When you start looking around our country, I was reading through, right now there are 29 states that currently allow people other than the police or other than security officers to carry guns. And so in addition to the issue of allowing these assault weapons in schools, there's been a lot of discussion about teachers carrying. I have my own sense of opinion on that. I'm going to give it to you in a moment and tell you what I think the solution is. Ohio, as an example, gives teachers the right to carry firearms after less than 24 hours of training. You heard that's right, less than 24 hours of training. I'm going to talk about some of the training elements of this in just a moment. In Ohio, the curriculum for training is still being drafted. When you look at individual districts, they can determine policies for training. So the issue of training is really important. In Florida, there are more than 1,300 school staff members working as armed guardians in the school districts. In Texas, there are at least 402 school districts enrolled in a program that allow people, including teachers and staff, to be armed. And in Pennsylvania, they've been discussing the topic and have introduced a new bill that would allow school employees with a license to carry a firearm, to carry a weapon at the school. I received an email from a school teacher in Madison County, interestingly enough, and I told her I would share her sentiments on my show. This is what the school teacher says. She says, I am vehemently opposed to the most recent news out of Madison County that they are allowing AK-15s in schools. Let me tell you guys why I think this is an important conversation, because I think it goes deeper than just the issue of Madison County and AR-15s. I think it goes to a deeper conversation about, number one, local school control. And let me just say this. I'm an advocate. I'm a proponent of local school control. I think federally and I think statewide, we just don't allow school systems to contextualize their work, right? And what happens in one part of the state is significantly different than what happens in another part of the state. So this is tricky for me. It's tricky because, as you know, I'm a state representative, and as a legislator, every opportunity I get to make sure the local control remains in schools, I try to do that. So one hand says to me, well, this is a local school board decision. This is a local county commissioner decision. The reason I struggle is because in one hand, you have local control where the county commissioners and the school board are making decisions. But on the other hand, when you look at the data suggests that the overwhelming majority of teachers don't want to carry. They don't want weapons in the school. And the data also suggests the largest percentage of parents don't want the teachers carrying and don't want weapons in schools. The reason I think this is hairy is because we say that we want to listen to the parents when it relates to curriculum, but then we don't listen to the parents when it comes to weapons and guns and rifles. So I think we need to pick our narrative and decide where we're going to land on this. This feels really political to me, and that bothers me. I think there's some problems with this. And let me just be really clear. You know, I'm a concealed weapon carrying guy. So in addition to being a pastor and a Democratic member of the State House, I also carry. And I go to the range regularly. So this is not, for me, an anti-Second Amendment show or podcast. It's not that at all. It does have everything to do with the fact that teachers are not trained to shoot weapons. I think if we would put the same level of effort into teachers being able to get the training they need to educate our children and stop making, this is one of the problems with public education. Unfortunately, in our nation, particularly here in North Carolina, we have made teachers into things that they're not. We're requiring them now to be counselors. We're requiring them now to be security personnel. We're requiring them now to be mental health coaches. We're requiring them now to do so much. And really what teachers want to do is teach. That's certainly what I want them to do. They want to teach. And so to now ask teachers to take on this militaristic posture or to have weapons, even if they are in safes in schools. I mean, think about the cost of the safe, the cost of whatever training is going to happen, and the cost of maintaining the weapons, and the cost of the weapons, and the cost of the bullets. Seems like to me we already are underfunding public education, and we've got money to spend. We should be spending it in the classroom, and we should be spending it to better educate our children. When you start looking at the public pay of teachers, North Carolina, it's pathetic. When you start looking at a professional educator's salary, man, oftentimes they can't even afford homes in the communities that they teach in. And so I think if we're going to be serious about reducing violence, I think one of the ways we can do it is we can make better investments in mental health, right? We can make better investments in social services. We can do other things to meet the basic needs of our children. And so I want to just kind of weigh in on this issue for a moment because, I don't know, I just wasn't expecting this. And I'm hoping this won't come to the county I'm living in. I'm hoping that we won't deal with this in rural eastern North Carolina. And so let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of this. And again, for those of you just tuning in, kind of combining The Madison County, North Carolina decision by the county commissioner, sheriff, and the school board to start housing AR-15 assault weapons in schools. And at the same time, coupling that conversation with the issue of teachers carrying. So let me say a few things, and I'd love to have your feedback. James@jamesgailliard.com is how you email me. And I'm going to put a poll out, and so check my website really soon at www.jamesgailliard.com, and I'm going to ask, do you agree or disagree that we should allow teachers to be armed, and do you disagree or agree in having AR-15 weapons placed in schools? Let me say a few things that I hope will trigger some thought for us on this issue. Number one, the people who are the proponents of this, the people who are saying, yes, we need to do this, part of their argument is that it's the constitutional right of the teacher to bear arms, right? Let me just remind you of a few things. When the framers of our Constitution wrote the Constitution, and we had the Second Amendment there, the weapon of choice of that at that moment was a musket, okay? A musket was capable of firing one round at a time. It had one round magazine. I mean, I have a magazine in my Glock that's 15 rounds, right? And I can probably empty that clip in, seconds. A musket was one round, and if you were really skilled at shooting, you might get off 3 rounds in a minute. 3 rounds in a minute. Think about that for a moment. Or if they didn't have muskets, they had what was called a flintlock pistol. And the flintlock pistol was a little bit faster. It could maybe get off 4 rounds in a minute. Best case scenario, when the framers of the Constitution wrote the Second Amendment, the most you could shoot was 3 to 4 rounds in a minute. And I think this is one of my principal arguments around why we need to be really careful about how we deal with these issues of assault weapons, because I don't think AR-15 assault weapons is what the framers of our Constitution had in mind. And so I don't know if you've ever done a simulation. As you know, my son is a Nash County sheriff, deputy sheriff, and I've had occasion to be able to participate in simulations, right? A simulation where you go into a room, they give you a weapon that, has some kind of powder or something in it. I don't know what exactly it fires off. And basically it puts you in front of a simulation screen, and they dial in a scenario, right? A scenario could be you're going to the ATM machine and a couple guys pull up and, they start shooting and you've got to then return fire. Excuse me. First time I went through one of those simulations, I was dead in an instant. And my son and I talk about this, and this is my point that I'm making with us. When those things happen in real time, it happens so fast. So fast. And when someone unfortunately shows up in our schools, in our churches, and they've got this assault weapon, and they're waging war on who's there. If I'm not a trained person, the scenarios happen so quickly that I could wind up doing damage to myself and even some innocent people. And so I think when we have these times of confusion, these times of duress, we have to be really careful that we don't employ untrained people into those scenarios. And so I'm opposed to this because I think we need to have trained people that's present in these scenarios. I'm opposed to it because most teachers oppose it. As I said, most parents oppose it. Think about this. Basic law enforcement training on average gives law enforcement personnel somewhere in the neighborhood of like 840 hours of training. The average full-time person works 2,080 hours. And so you're talking about a good solid 4-5 months of training to go through basic law enforcement training. Of that average 840 hours, 168 hours of it is just in the issue of weapons, self-defense, use of force. And now watch this. Even with that skill training, The data suggests that even a highly trained officer only hits their target about 20% of the time. Now, think about this. You are highly trained, and 80% of the time you miss. But we're going to put an AR-15 in a school, or we're going to allow a teacher to carry in a school, and we think this untrained person is literally going to hit the target. I just think it's dangerous. I think we can look at better solutions, different kinds of solutions. And so I want to, in this show, I try to tell you what both sides think about an issue. I try to tell you what the real issue is. And then I try to tell you, well, what can we do about it? So I do think there's some things we can do to protect kids, to better protect kids. And again, let me be really clear. I'm not this anti-gun guy. I'm just not. But I think there's some things that we can do to help. First of all, and before I get into all those solutions, let me just say this too. An armed teacher is more likely to shoot a student or a bystander or be shot by a responding law enforcement officer than they, in turn, will actually actively shoot a person that's shooting in school. So just don't like the solution, guys. But let me give you a few. Number one, I think the first answer is just sensible gun laws. And I mean, we live in a gun culture. Because we live in a gun culture, we're not getting rid of guns, right? And I think for people that think people want to that there's this big uprising of people that want to get rid of guns, I just don't think that's accurate. I have not met that guy. Let me put it that way. We've got several weapons in our home. I've not met the guy who just wants to get rid of guns. Our church has armed personnel that carry. They quarterly have to qualify and go to the range. I just think there should be sensible gun laws. So I think that's solution number one. I think the second solution is making sure that we're clear with people like me who own guns around what firearm storage laws should look like, right? And if not laws, certainly some recommendations on how we store our firearms. So I think that's a part of it. I think these red flag laws are important. That's an example for me of a sensible gun law. I think when people show sign of being at risk, we should take that seriously. And we should be careful as to whether or not they are allowed to be able to conceal carry, be able to purchase a handgun. I think, and this is really controversial, but raising the age to purchase a semi-automatic weapon to 21, I think it makes sense. And again, I recognize that people are going to feel like, hey, this is anti-Second Amendment. No, it's not. I just think when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you can be really emotional about some stuff and don't know that you need to go run off buying a semi-automatic weapon at 18 or 19 years old. And so I do think that we need to raise that age. I think there does need to be a background check on all gun sales. That includes the sales at gun shows. Like every loophole needs to be closed. So we need to have proper background checks. I had a trailer, an enclosed trailer, I don't know, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I bought it for my motorcycle. It's where I kept my Harley Davidson. But then I realized, I was keeping the bike in the garage most of the time. I wasn't using the enclosed trailer, so I decided to go ahead and sell the trailer. And so I advertised it on Craigslist, and in like no short time at all, somebody came along and bought the trailer. I've sold personal cars. I've sold homes. And when I sell a trailer, when I've sold my motorcycle in the past, my previous one, when I sold a car, the registration of ownership follows the item. So now I don't own the trailer and it's no longer registered in my name because I registered it in the name of the person, or the person who bought it registered it in their name. That's what I think about weapons and guns. Like, I think if I buy a weapon from somebody then the registration should leave my name and it should be in your name. And so I think something as simple as registering weapons so we know who it belongs to. I mean, if somebody steals a car and wrecks it or hurts a person or runs them over and kills them, we don't have to wonder who owns the car. Like, we can quickly check the registration. I think it would make a massive difference if we could check the registration of people that owned weapons. So I think we need to register all of our weapons. I think instead of putting AR-15s in schools and having teachers be armed, I think we can develop threat assessment programs. I saw recently here in Nash County, North Carolina, where our sheriff department went into a school and they did a simulation and they did a threat assessment. Do you remember, I'm aging myself a little bit, but do you remember being in school and they would have those fire drills, right? They would have those fire alarms. And man, this just bothers me for our children, though, that they have to go to school wondering if they're going to get out. I mean, that does bother me. But I do think we can do threat assessment programs. I think we can teach children what they can do to be safe. I think we can do some security upgrades to our buildings. And I think this is part of the reason why we've got a better fund public education, because the reality of it is many of our buildings are old. They are dilapidated. They're difficult to secure. They're difficult to upgrade. And we need a massive North Carolina bond referendum or some type of bond to build schools. And then we need to outfit those schools with the proper security upgrades to keep our children safe. But I don't think the answer is putting a safe with a bunch of AR-15s in a school system. It just doesn't feel like the best answer for me. And so I wanted to just weigh in on that today. I wanted to talk about this issue of guns in schools, this issue of teachers carrying weapons in schools, and want to just really encourage us to really think through this issue. And as we think through this issue, to try to come up with really substantive issues and solutions, substantive solutions rather, for issues like this. So I'd love to hear your feedback on this. I mean, do you think assault weapons should be placed in schools? Are you a parent? Are you a teacher? What are your opinions about this? And so, if you're listening to this podcast on one of my social media outlets or on a podcast station, and you've got an opportunity to make a comment on YouTube, I want to encourage you to do that. And so I'm going to come back with another segment later on this week. But again, Madison County, North Carolina is what I'm talking about today. AR-15 guns placed in every school in the event of a future mass shooting. It is a highly Republican county with a Democratic sheriff who may be politicizing this issue of school safety for a future election. Don't know that that's what he is doing, but it certainly feels like that to me. The sheriff has said, and other people associated with this, look, I don't want to have to run back out to the car to grab an AR because that's time lost. But when you think about it, I mean, yeah, you'll have a school resource officer in the school, but wherever he or she is, they still have to get to that weapon. And generally, when there is an attack on schools, most of the support is coming from the outside. And when they come in from the outside with that support, they're bringing their AR-15s with them. I hate the thought that kids can't learn because they don't feel safe. They don't feel secure. And so we have to do something to address the issue of gun violence, the issue of violence in our schools specifically. But I don't think arming our schools with AR-15s and telling our teachers to go militant and vigilante is the answer. And so appreciate you listening today. Would love to have your feedback. What is your thoughts on AR-15s being placed in schools? What are your thoughts about teachers carrying weapons in schools? You can reach me on email at james@jamesgailliard.com, and I hope you'll go to www.jamesgailliard.com to respond to the survey question this week about AR-15s and teachers being armed. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Well, we're out of time for today. I hope the episode informed you. Hope it inspired you. If you enjoyed it, would you go ahead and subscribe to my podcast? Would you also consider following me on one of our social media outlets, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at JD Gailliard. We'd love to also hear your ideas about future episodes. So go ahead and email me at james@jamesgailliard.com. And finally, go ahead on my website, jamesgailliard.com, and respond to our poll for the week. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.